Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It's a pleasure to welcome you all here to our third session of our very tiny lecture series on agroecology. It's a pleasure to meet you all um, online today. So kind regards to wherever you are and wherever you join us. It's really for us, it's a pleasure to use this public lecture as a kind of a platform to connect and to discuss about agroecology. We have had already two presentations on what agroecology is, so I don't go into detail anymore. So we have a certain basis developed together. But what is key, of course, is that the simultaneously application of ecological and social concepts, and that agroecology represents a comprehensive system framework to guide public policy towards sustainable agricultural and food systems. And that's also something we heard already in the two prior sessions we had, that this full and multi-scale food system approach, the holistic understanding of agroecology from farm to food system level, and that requires also then adaptation in the policy framework, that there are processes and tools around to monitor also change induced by agroecological systems. We have heard about the TAPE tool, for example, mentioned by Madeleine Kaufmann, and the importance of the approach highlighting synergies and trade-offs. And then that requires, of course, then also kind of a link to the policy domain in order to come up with coherent policies in agricultural and food systems, which go beyond agriculture in the narrower sense, but really have also an emphasis on broader food system topics, which includes also the development, the environmental aspects, but also health aspects. So that's where we come from the two prior sessions we had. And I'm now really happy to welcome Stephanie Bondini. She's co-head of Policy and Advocacy Team and co-executive director of the BioVision Foundation. She has a long track record on agroecology and also on the advocacy work for sustainable food systems. And I'm very happy to have you with us today, Stephanie, to share your perspective on the role of agroecology in food system transformation. And it's not a lesser pleasure to welcome Rémi Cluzet also among us. He is agroecology advisor at the Food and Agricultural Organization, FAO, of the United Nations based in Rome. And he will share some of the work done at FAO or in partnership with others, coordinated by FAO with us on agroecology today. Just quickly on the agenda, as in the other two sessions, we are in the middle of a short intro by myself, and then I will hand over directly to Stephanie. She will share some tools and showcases on how agroecology can play a role in food system transformation. Then the stick goes directly further to Rémi before we then at the end open for questions and answers. So please feel free to raise questions in the chat or wait until the two presentations are done and then raise your virtual hand and we will give you the floor for a short Q&A at the end of this more or less 1 hour session. And with that, I don't want to use or eat more time of Stephanie and Rémi. It's a big pleasure to have you both with us. Thank you very much for joining. And I will unshare so that you can take over the floor, Stephanie. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you so much. Let me share my presentation first. Can you see the presentation in presentation mode?
Perfectly fine.
Perfect. Oh, great. So thank you so much. It's really a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much that I can give you some insights in our work and how we feel agroecology really contributes to the food system transformation that is urgently needed. I'm gonna, oh, no, you don't. I cannot.
Yeah.
Now it's working, right? So my input will go as follows. I will say a few words about BioVision Foundation, who we are, what we do. And then I'm going to dive into some of the tools that we developed over the years with the overarching goal to really increase the understanding on agroecology. I'm going to move on to some key elements and levers of food system transformation, and we'll end up with most likely only one showcase. If I'm really fast, I can maybe cover two. So who are we? Who is BioVision Foundation? We are an NGO based in Zurich. We have around 60 employees at the moment. And our vision is a world with enough and healthy food for all, produced by healthy people in a healthy environment. And we work on 3 areas. We work in sub-Saharan Africa, focus is on East Africa, where we, together with local organizations, develop and disseminate agroecological production systems. So we don't have offices in countries. We really work through local organizations, mainly research organizations like ICIPE. I don't know if you know ICIPE. So we really work through and with those organizations. Secondly, we work on a global, international area, where we try to influence, sensitize, inform decision makers. It can be policy makers, but also decision makers from research. And the last 2-3 years, we also work with decision makers when it comes to investments. So we work with financiers, donors, and also investment banks or global development banks, for example. Last but not least, we work in Switzerland. We have a team that is committed to sensitize consumer awareness in Switzerland, but also working on a policy level in Switzerland, which is not so easy at the moment, as you can imagine, but we are still trying to make it more agroecological. So for BioVision, we are very convinced that in order to achieve our vision, we need to work through agroecology. So Martin already covered the basics, the concept. I think you heard a lot, so I'm not going to go in detail about what it is, but I really like this visualization. So before agroecology emerged, we really had these 2 dominant agriculture systems: industrial agriculture, really the dominant system worldwide, but then also subsistent agriculture, mostly in developing countries, farmer communities really producing only for themselves, if even possible. And agroecology is really an important and great further development of these 2 systems. And it has really key elements that differs from industrial or subsistent agriculture. One being it's really producing for local markets. So territorial markets are really key. So it's not about export orientation. It's really to make sure local communities benefit from agroecology. Its diversity is important, so the farm should be as diverse as possible, many different crops, livestock integrated to make sure shocks, crises, climate change, for example, doesn't hit as hard if you have different revenue streams on a farm. And then a very important point is the reduction on chemical inputs. So certain synthetic fertilizer, pesticides should be minimized as much as possible in an agroecological system. Last but not least, agroecology is knowledge intense. So farmer communities need to get a lot of knowledge in order to really transition to agroecology, but also a lot of research. Academia needs to do a lot of work because a lot of information is still needed on how to best implement agroecology. So what we realized is, as I just mentioned, agroecology is not that easy. It is a complex concept. And we realized that tools really help to make it better understandably. Decision makers, but also research, academia, policymakers really like these kind of tools that make it more concrete. So in 2018, we developed or established the website, the knowledge platform Agroecology Info Pool. I don't know if you have visited it yet. If not, please do so. There are some definitions, the history of agroecology is in there, a lot of showcases, policy briefs and tools. That's what I'm going to talk about now. We have developed over the years different tools Because of time, I just can showcase one of our latest, but we have tools for different areas. So we have, if you want to analyze a farm to see how agroecological a farm is, you can use the farm level agroecology criteria tool, for example. If you want to look at the business, we have the business agroecology criteria tool, and so forth. Our latest tool is the Agroecology Investment Guide. That's a very rich website with evidence for financiers to really show why we should invest in businesses that operate in line with agroecology. And that's what I'm going to tell you now about. This is the Business Agroecology Criteria Tool, the BACT. And why did we come up with the BACT? We realized that there is a lot of talk of the private sector when it comes to international conferences, fora, the WEF. Everyone says, oh, without the private sector, we cannot transform our food system. But these talks are always about the big multinational corporations, so the big businesses. But the small and medium-sized enterprises are often really overlooked and neglected in these discussions. We always say, oh no, the big corporations need to change, they are really harmful, but it's not really taken into account that there are millions and millions of small and medium-sized enterprises around the world that are already operating quite agroecological. But for that, we need to assess how aligned these businesses operate. So this is the BACT. It measures the intention of a business and not its impact. So it's not an impact measurement tool, that's important. And the key target groups are, I would say, investors, donors, and entrepreneurs. So what is an agroecological business or enterprise? So that's a business where its operations are really aligned with the 13 principles of agroecology. And what does that mean? It means it really creates positive social and environmental impact. And as we unfortunately know, many businesses actually do the opposite. They really harm the environment and really extract a lot of resources from social communities. So an business that operates in an agroecological way really creates positive impact. It works for the local market and is really based on fairness and equity in the food system. So, and now I will guide you quickly through the BACT. The BACT is a Google Sheets form, so it's open for free for everyone to use. You can also change it to adapt it very easily. And there has different tabs that you need to fill out. And I'm just showing you now the most important tabs and the results that it generates. So the first one is the screening a question tab. We realized it's important to also test if a business is in conflict with the principles of agroecology. And these screening questions were developed actually in a big consortium where also FAO was there. I don't know if it was Remy or a colleague of him. IFAD was there, important research organizations were there. So there are about 12 questions. And for example, promoting use of synthetic fertilizer and pesticide is one question. So it's not about if a business is still using a bit of fertilizer or pesticides, but if it's promoting really the use, so if it makes money because of synthetic fertilizer or pesticides, it's really a red flag. So this business cannot be called agroecological. You can still assess it, you can use the tool until the end, but we really then say, okay, this business is not an agroecological business because really that's a red flag. And this tab is the principal questions tab. That's the heart of the tool, I would call it. So for each of the 13 principles, there are a couple of questions. In total, there are 50 questions and examples to better understand the questions. And you have 3 options how to answer: yes, no, and non-applicable. The NA, non-applicable, is quite important to understand because, for example, if there is a business who has no animals, no livestock. And as you know, there is a principle on animal health. So it would be quite sad for the business if they would need to say no, because it would kind of punish them in the scoring system. So you can say NA if there is something that a business really cannot do, a principle or a question that really it's not possible for them to achieve. The indirect is also an important column because it shows what the business, what influence the business has on other actors along the value chain. So for example, if you're a restaurant, And you are not producing the mangoes yourself, but you are sourcing mangoes from farmers. And you say you only want to buy organic mangoes. You have an influence on how the farmers produce, right? So you have an indirect influence because you don't produce the mangoes yourself, but you have a positive influence on value chain actors. So if you fill out all these 50 questions, it gives you a score. So that's now the result, how agroecological you are, and you see in the visualization in which principles you are very good and in which maybe you can still improve. It's also a breakdown where you can see for each of the 13 principles how well you scored. For the 3 principles you scored lowest, it gives you some suggestions how you can integrate those principles, how to make sure you score better. And it also shows you how your operations are in line with the 17 SDGs. At the end of using the tool, you have this nice visualization, and we realize especially entrepreneurs like it because they can show to potential investors and donors where the focus lies of their enterprise, where they are strong, and how agroecological they are. Good. And now I'm going to talk a bit about key elements, key levers of the food systems transformation. BioVision Foundation, myself, were tasked by the Global Alliance for the Future of Food in 2017 to really analyze the literature to see how does a transformation, a transition happen. And we looked through all the literature about sustainable transition to realize, okay, or to see, okay, what are key success factors? What are steps that need to happen in order to have this transformation going? And this report, The Beacons of Hope, it's really worth looking at if you haven't touched it yet. It has also 30 showcases, successful showcases of initiatives, projects around the world that are shortly broadcasted there with some opportunities and also some maybe challenges. And I'm just shortly talking about the key steps, what we found out in the literature. So mostly when you start something, you start with a project, with an initiative, with a coordinated action together with some people, with a team in an area, and you test out an approach. And that's mostly quite protected. You have the money, you can do it. It's not open to pressure from the market or policies. It's something that you can really test it out. It's incubated. You can accelerate your approach. So it's something that really is in an early stage, an approach that you want to see how it works. So that's the first step of a transformation. But then you need to also tackle policies and practices that are in place. And as we know, this dominant agriculture system that we have right now, there are a lot of policies and practices that are protecting this system and making sure it's still in place and it's being kept in place. And if you want to really transform something, you need to confront that. And a project, an initiative can do so. And it's not a straightforward process. It takes, because BioVision does that when it comes to policies, but also practices. So you have setbacks. It's not so easy to do. But if you really want to get the transformation going, you need to really confront policies and practices that keep the current food system in place. The third key pillar or element, and it goes then in the expansion of this transformation, is building legitimacy. And that means this approach that you want to foster now here, agroecology, needs to be legitimized. And how you can best do that, mostly with science-based, with evidence to underscore that it works. You can also do that with policies, but as we are now here in research, focused group, I think it's really important to see that this legitimization through evidence is very key. So we really need to show that there is evidence, that it's not just something that works in one part of the world, that it works in different parts, maybe in a different setting. It's not a silver bullet, as we know, agroecology, but we really need to focus on this legitimization process. And last but not least, if we want to have this as a successful transformation, it needs to be anchored. So it needs to be anchored in policies, for example, in a law. It needs to be really written down somewhere in curricula. It can also be something anchored. If now the World Food Systems Center has agroecology in the curricula, that's something that is anchored there. It cannot be taken away very easily. So these are key steps or elements of food systems transformation that's more described or in more detail in the Beacons of Hope report. BioVision Foundation, a couple of years back, we also thought deeply about what key levers are needed. What do we need to do with our partners to have this agroecological transformation happening that we would like to see? And we came up with 5 levers that we think needs to be tackled at the same time in order to see this transformation happening. And I'm just going to show you shortly what we think or believe are these key levers. So one is the production system. So we develop and promote, as I mentioned, agroecological production systems. So this needs to really happen, and also evidence needs to be produced that it works, that it creates yields, that it's more sustainable than other systems. Then we need to spread and promote agroecological knowledge and research. The third one is markets and enterprises, because without markets, without businesses, it's not going to be sustainable. Civil society engagement is key. Here we talk about, for example, the role of the consumers. So consumer awareness, consumer sensitization movements are really important for this transformation. So also this bottom-up movement and pressure, that is key. And last but not least, maybe you can already guess what the last point is. It's policies, the policy frameworks that really need to enable an agroecological transformation. And you often cannot, with one project, tackle everything at the same time. But if you're an organization or if you are a researcher that works over several years on something, I think it's really key to make sure the different elements, the different levers are embedded over time. And yeah, we work now really on these 5 levers with different teams in different regions. But there is unfortunately always a but, right? I don't know if you know this report from IPES Food, From Uniformity to Diversity. I think it's really an excellent report if you haven't came across it. So it's really worth to read it. It talks about the 8 key lock-ins that keeps our industrial agriculture system in place. It describes these 8 challenges or lock-ins. And what I'm going to show you now shortly is how this relates to the key levers that I showed before. So for the production systems, for example, one key lock-in is short-term thinking, right? Because people, actors, governments, they always want to have yields the next year high, but they don't care that much what happens in 3 to 5 to 10 years. So short-term thinking is a key lock-in. Spreading knowledge research, I think that's something you are well aware of. Measures of success, one key lock-in. So you need to publish a lot of papers in a very short time. It needs to happen fast, easy, simple, not involving too many people, not across different departments if possible, because that is time consuming. Involving farmers, really difficult, but important. So it's also a big lock-in. I can just explain some because of the time, but you see the rest. Export orientation when it comes to markets, businesses. Yeah, I think that's self-explanatory. Economy of scale, right? People want to export one cash crop because it's easier, and the diversity of agroecology or an agroecological farm is different, of course. Expectation of cheap food. Consumers often just want to pay less for the food, and they don't want to pay for the negative external costs that the production entails. And here, yes, path dependencies, export orientation comes into play, of course, also when we talk about policies. Last but not least, concentration of power lies really in the heart because it touches upon all the levers and it's a key lock-in. So I think it's very important that when you have some research or a project that you always think about what kind of lock-ins you could come across and how to address those. I'm now going to show and end with a positive example, a showcase that we strongly contributed to and explain some success factors, but also challenges we came across. So Tanzania launched last year, end of last year, its first national strategy on agroecology, or it's called ecological organic agriculture, but it's actually agroecology, just some history behind why it's a different wording. And what is special about this strategy? It's really the first comprehensive policy document on agroecology on the continent. And why is because it's not just focusing on production practices, but really tackles the whole value chain. So really the businesses, knowledge, from research to implementation, capacity building, it's really a comprehensive document with all the elements in there, what we can call agroecology. And it combines both organic and agroecology because organic was already quite famous, quite well known in Tanzania. There was a strong involvement and commitment of the Tanzanian government, and I think that was one of the key success factors. I'm going to talk about that in a second. And there was a good collaboration, not always, but I would say mainly between the government and the civil society organizations that drove this process forward. So that was SAT, Sustainable Agriculture Tanzania, and TOAM, both actors, organizations we BioVision support and work with. So what were the success factors? So I already mentioned it, the political will. So the government was really open. They listened to the CSOs and the farmers, and they quite early in the process took ownership of the strategy. So they didn't feel it was someone else who pushed for it, but the CSOs, the farmer groups, brought them on board from the beginning. So the government really felt, okay, that was their strategy and not someone else who wanted to convince them on something. And what was also important is that they really explained the government what agroecology is about and how agroecology helps them to achieve their government goals, so that it's not a threat, but really part of the solution. And there were many farmers already practicing it successfully. So they also brought the government to some fields to show what it actually looks like in reality. So not so meta level concept, but really they did field visit to show it. They had evidence from different regions where it works well, maybe where not. And they also had a peer-to-peer exchange that BioVision organized, where we brought 8 governments together so that they could learn from each other to see where they stand in the process, so they didn't have to develop it from scratch. They could learn from others and avoid to do the mistakes that maybe other governments did when developing such a strategy. Challenges, as you know, if you have a policy, you need to implement it, and that costs money. So we are now in the stage where we try to bring different donors, funders together. We had a workshop in Arusha this year in Tanzania, where we invited a lot of donors to see who can fund what to make sure the strategy now is really being implemented. And unfortunately, not all the key organizations had enough resources to participate in this process. That's, of course, always an issue. And you always have other actors that push in another direction and push for another vision. And no, I was a bit too long. I'm sorry. That's my last slide. Now, after this 3 or 2.5 series on agroecology, what would you say? Which person reflects you and your attitude towards agroecology best? You can look at the picture and then maybe write into the chat what number you think you are. And then I stop sharing. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Stephanie, for this presentation and this funny picture at the end. Oh, it's a pity that you can leave it a bit longer. I had the chance to look at all the numbers, but it's a nice inspiration. Thank you very much. Directly over to you, Remy, before we then open for Q&As. Thank you for being with us, Remy.
Yes, so please tell me if you see the screen.
Perfectly nice.
So Stephanie, I chose number 1.
Good.
So thank you for this presentation. Both presentation will be quite complementary. Mine will be more like, I say, disruptive, with not a structured plan like the one of Stephanie. I chose to speak about 6 entry points for transformative change. The last one will be the tape tool that I usually speak about, because that's the tool I'm managing here in FAO. But before tape tool, you have vision of other approaches. Alors, okay. The first one, yes, it was just, you work on agroecology so far, so it's not new, but what is interesting is like agroecology transform itself. It evolved. And it's true that it's, I think, by nature transformative, because it was already said by Martin, it started at plot level 100 years ago. Now it encompasses the whole food system approach. And that makes, by nature, agroecology transformative, because you had a social movement behind that who pushed. So it was more agronomy in the beginning, practices in agronomy, but after you had science, and after you have social movement, and now you have public policies, well illustrated by Stephanie. This national strategy, for instance, is really interesting, because you need to have public policies that encompass all the different segments that are not working in silo. So you have this nice schema of Pablo Titonel, who resume like this food system approach, who go really far beyond the agro-ecosystem approach, who was not so bad in the beginning. What was really interesting also, the agro-ecosystem part versus people and food system part. And this is quite new also, because when we did the symposium on agroecology, when we were speaking about agroecology for Europe, for many researchers in Europe, agroecology was agroecosystem, was ecosystem services and so on. So we learned a lot when we were confronted to the entire world, I would say. So I wanted to show this second slide with about the second point for me was really interesting in the transformative process, because what happened in FAO, agroecology was not in the program of work. It was not recognized, I would say. There was a lot of member countries who wanted to work on agroecology, wanted FAO to promote agroecology. FAO was known as the temple of the green revolution. People were not expecting FAO to work on this. Maybe they had lost hope, I would say. And in 2014, members countries say, okay, let's examine if agroecology is a promising approach or not. So they asked us to organize a series of seminars. So 2 international seminars, 2014 and 18, and regional seminars. And that was really interesting, because in every regional seminar, so regional in Asia, Africa, Latin America, and so on, different researchers were speaking and confronting, and we have like different approach and tendencies. With FAO, when I arrive in FAO, I say, oh, I would like to make a definition of agroecology after these 4 years. I would be happy to do that. Everybody told me, no, forget it immediately. You will see, agroecology is totally context specific. So let's come up with principle elements. So that's what we did. So after these 4 or 5 years of work, yeah, so we came up with the 10 elements of agroecology. I think you know the framework. But what was interesting is, okay, we don't have any definition. In FAO website, we have like more than 30 or 40 definitions of agroecology. But we have the 10 elements with one framework. So I think that's a message really important when we speak about transforming or not. You need to use the framework and all the framework and not part of it. So that's really, really important, as that protects from greenwashing, because I saw in the chat the greenwashing word. Yeah, so if you want to be protected from greenwashing, you need to be holistic. What happened also in the end of this process? We had the 10 elements, so it was a negotiated document. When I say negotiated, that's super important, because we speak here about policy process. So far, all the meetings we made were made like it was like conference, discussion, members countries, civil society organization, everybody was together, but there was no official decision. Official decision in FAO is taken by members country after a cycle of I say process. And what the nice important part is that FAO accepted to discuss on the 10 elements, and members countries, so the 197 countries, made a resolution and voted for the 10 elements. Of course, they were discussed. The content element was discussed because you need to have a compromise. But that's really nice that it was understood that agroecology is not only practices. Agroecology is more than practices. That's what we say. And that this is something super important. It's a milestone we have. It's a backbone we have that protects agroecology from greenwashing. Also, we are asked to develop new metrics. As Stephanie said, the measure of success is really important. And the success in agriculture was more yield, annual yield, and you don't have a long-term measurement, and you don't think about what are the social aspects, what about the environment. So we're asked to make to measure the multidimensional performance of agroecology. And the idea was behind this was, okay, now in 2018, members countries say, okay, now agroecology is inside FAO. In a work plan, we create position, we give budget for agroecology, but we still need the evidence. We still need to be sure if we, as FAO, we support members country when they want to elaborate a policy. So we want to support them with evidence. So don't put members country in a direction that we regret later on. So please back you up, have evidence. That's what we've been doing for a few years now. After this process, many things happen on agroecology. And about you know the CFS policy recommendation, you know the Agroecology Coalition. It's not the topic today. So level 3, I just wanted to show the 10 elements in the middle of 2 other frameworks that are super important. The 13 principles of the HLPE. So they were mentioned by Stephanie. It's complicated, but just to say they are aligned. So the 10 elements were officially adopted, but everything is aligned. You have the same thing behind this. So you can select the one you like. The idea is to be realistic. And of course, the 5 level of transition of Glisman, for me, that was the important part. You speak about incremental change and after transformational change. So that is important. Even if it's, this scale is like criticized now because we say it's not always in that direction, and the starting point is not always good because the starting point is not always industrial. The starting point, you saw it with Stephanie, can be subsistence agriculture. So it's a different pathway, but it's still interesting to see that all these things are connected. So this fourth one, I think it's an interesting one I found recently, I must say, while despite it's not recent. You have domain of transformation. So it's come from 2 publications, one of 2019 from Anderson. We identify domain of transformation. That could be elements, the 10 elements. You have 7 of them. And a new publication done recently, 2020 by Wat al, while complementing or co-opting. So I think it's interesting because now I think it answers a lot of questions about this. So for instance, for nature and resources, if you see it's a domain of transformation, you have the higher domain, autonomy for securing sustainable access to resources. And the disabling domain, privatization of common resources. So the disabling environment could be the red flag or the red that also presented in the B Act that we elaborated. Yes, I was there, Stephanie, we elaborated with the coalition to say what if you go that direction, you won't go in that direction. So that it's important to see what is a mistake, because sometimes economic actors doesn't know. They don't have all this information. So sometimes, yeah, they need this. So for instance, I can go to governance, decentralized horizontal and rhizomal structure to highly centralized pyramidal structure. What is interesting for economic exchange, traditional system exchange, profit and growth oriented. So it's quite tough. You can see a few words. I don't read everything because it's not a fair publication. You can see a few words are quite tough, but that's the debate. Huh? When you organize discussion, I think if you're not tough, you don't move. But that's an interesting part. And using this scale, I use it for this because I was last week, 2 weeks ago in Lausanne. We were discussing in the Science Day about the definition. And interestingly, you have organic farming. It depends, you know, if you are on commodity approaches or not. So the level of enabling a transformative way can depend. The more interesting is regenerative farming, because we have a lot of discussion about regenerative farming these days. And you have different trends in regenerative farming. Depends who is behind, which current you are speaking about. Some people say it's all bad or it's all good. No, it's not. It depends. So you have a commodification approach, for true, was done to export. So you can see it's more business as usual if you look at all the factors. Another one with totally sociological approach, who has the origin of agroecology, by the way, who is really transformative. And this is quite, by the way, this work is really close to what we did with TAPE in 2019, by the way, and I will show you that. Now it's about the visual narrative. So I'll go directly to this one, the 5 point. It's a little more conceptual. I won't go into detail now, but it's based on the 10 elements. And the idea is, oh, we have 10 elements. So the 10 elements, if you want to, you have a policymaker, you want to make a change, you can't work in silo, of course. So you need to have, it was already explained, you have to work with all the different aspects. So for instance, here, the idea is to use the 10 elements and to see what are the linkage, and to work on the nexus analysis. So we speak about like nexus analysis with a big interdependency and trade-off between different aspects. For instance, biodiversity, nutrition, and climate change. You can have also water, energy, and land nexus. So you speak about one nexus, and you try to see what is your entry point and what could be your policy package. For the first one, for instance, it should be agricultural support policy, market policy, land tenure regulation. So you can see this policy package also linked with what Stephanie showed us. You have also the importance of consumer, of course, if you want to make a change, the importance of consumer. So public, it can be public procurement. You can have, you can also inform consumer. So you have a publication, and you can learn more about this. But at this stage, it's not a tool. It's like it's more theoretical approaches. So now the last one with a tool is TAPE. So the TAPE, we started the work of TAPE in 2018. It's based on the 10 elements. So it's quite close to similar to what we saw with Stephanie, or the tool were based on certain principle, because you have principle, but behind that we have criteria, and the criteria are the same. So we are analyzing the same thing with different entry point. What we are doing with TAPE, so we do two things. We assess the level of transition, and we assess the performance of household. What is interesting is that we are asked, as I told you in the beginning, to assess the performance, multidimensional performance of agroecology, to prove or not that it can work. What we see is all these years, people are really interested in assessing the level of transition of agroecology, because people say, we know agroecology is positive. We don't need to have other aspects. We just want to know how far are we in agroecology, and like how can we can be more agroecological. So the first step is there is a lot of enthusiasm for this one. But our objective in FAO, that I don't forget, for us is to generate evidence. So within a few years, what we want to do in FAO, we want to have official reports accepted by the government, say, okay, agroecology is a real solution. It's not an eternal debate. We don't want to speak about that for years. We just say, okay, there are trade-offs, of course, but it's a solution. We give you what as a trade-off, and you make your choice. If you want to foster more the social aspect, the long-term aspect, or the short-term aspect, by the way, we can say what agroecology is bringing. And we want to be clear on this because it will support other people on the field who are working. So TAPE quickly, because I think it's not the main more important part, but so you make a survey with Android device of a tablet. So you characterize the transition, performance, but the objective of TAPE is to have a policy dialogue behind. Huh? It's nice to characterize, but our objective is to have data and to have a policy dialogue with policymaker and try to see how we can make a change either in a project if we are local level, either in a policy program if we are national level. So that's our objective as FAO, to be to work with the government at national level. So it's the same that I show you. It's a little different, but you know, you have the 10 elements here. You have indices, and we give a note to every indices. So a scale, the same scale that you saw for the domain of transformation. And we give a note. And with this, we are able to tell you, in a way, how transformative you are and how agroecological you are. For instance, diversity. You have diversity of crops, animal, trees, and economic activities. And you decide in diversity about monoculture to high number of crops. Same for animals, same for trees, same for economic activities. And in the end, after this, so you have results. So criteria, so element by element and criteria by criteria, you have your result where you are strong, where you are not strong, where you could do better. You can do also, this was done, for instance, at project level. You have a project with beneficiaries of a program. It was ProSoil, a program to restore soil, but an agroecology program. So the beneficiaries are in green, and the non-beneficiaries, it was a comparison group, are in black. And you can see the level of transition of the beneficiaries after 4 years is really higher than the non-ProSoil. So this was a good news that the project was efficient. Here you can see the details. So this is a note given for all aggregated. If you disaggregate in 10 elements, you can see where they were performing less. And there you disaggregate with the 36 indices. So you have different level of precision if you want. And the second part is about the performance. So the performance at governance, economy, health and nutrition, society and culture and environment level. So the measure of impact is super important. I think that what makes TAPE different from many other tools, that we measure not only agroecology, but impact, because we want to come back to FAO and to member country to say, okay, agroecology can support farmers for their income, because the economic aspect of agroecology is often discussed. So we need to have evidence. The food and security also is often discussed. Can agroecology feed the world? So that's what we have, an indicator on food security. Yes, food security. And we need to prove and to discuss the language of policymakers who want clear evidence. So we have these 10 criteria and that we are measuring every time to make a correlation between agroecology and these indicators, objective or productivity. It's objective. It's not, it's agroecology, we like it. It's objective. Is it good or is it bad? So for instance, here, the value of production, you can see the more you are agroecological, the better, the higher is the value of production. So for us, we are happy. It's a good result. It's in Africa. It's in 8 countries, more than 1,000 farms. So this kind of evidence is super important for us and will be super useful in the future. But we need evidence we need more and more evidence. Same for food security. Look at the food security, the link. The score is higher with a higher agroecological level. So this is, and this is how we can transform. Huh? We need to convince first. And just to finish, so TAPE is developed in 58 countries. And now we are working on a second step of TAPE with the support of the European Commission to a TAPE like more comprehensive. We want to make a link also with other tools because we have many tools. We want the tool to discuss together. And also what we will do is TAPE at national level. So we want to make assessment at national level to be able to have a policy discussion, to work on all these policy discussion, policy coherence, and also maybe having new policies as we saw the national strategy. We can trigger this, or we can also ask policymakers to have more coherence in what they are doing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Remy, for this quick tour around 6 different transformation ideas and shifting from conceptual work to more evidence-based work. Thank you very much for this. And as you mentioned already, there is indeed already a question in the chat, which you kind of started to answer, but I guess it came up when Stephanie was talking, and I guess it would be very interesting to hear your thoughts on this, on how do you keep the assessment tool safe from being used as a greenwashing tool, as it only does assess intentions and not really impact? And also because the actors themselves can self-score themselves.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's a very good question, very important one. I think it really depends for what purpose the B-Act or the tools are used. And if it helps an entrepreneur to become more agroecological, it's not a problem if he or she uses the tool themselves, right? What we are currently doing is we organize a prize, an award for the most agroecological businesses that is being held in Kigali in December. So it was a call for proposal or business plans, so people could submit what the businesses are doing. And there we assessed the ones who kind of passed the first step, we assessed them. So we made sure that we, based on business plans, documents that were available, we assessed the businesses in the first step. Then we had interviews. And now what's currently happening, there are field visits, because there are also some people who are really nicely explaining things or having things very nicely documented. But currently we have a team that is really visiting all these enterprises that are in the last stage of this award, because the last 3 enterprises will get some prize money. So it really depends, you know, what are you using the tool for? And then it really matters who is doing this assessment. Investors, we also have some investors or donors. For example, IFAD is using the tool, and they have really consultants assessing the businesses themselves, but then they check their assessment with the entrepreneurs to see if they are more or less in agreement. But it's clear if someone is assessing the business, it's, yeah, you are biased, right? And you give a better scoring, or you assess it much better than an external person would do it. So we try to have different mechanisms in place to avoid greenwashing, but it's also something just to help increase understanding on agroecology. And just if a person goes through these questions, we feel it's educating, you know, it's not a tool that you don't get a certification at the end, oh, you are agroecological, but it helps you to increase the understanding and add maybe some revenue streams or some activities to become more agroecological.
Thank you, Stephanie. Remy, anything to add on the greenwashing question? Is that something which is relevant for your work, or is that something you, with your transformation chart where you make these comparisons, you can address some of the issues related to greenwashing because you just place whatever intervention it is in these 4 very colorful charts you had?
Yeah, you're never protected from this, but you know, conceptually you can be protected with 2 ways. First, it's true that you have a global framework, so you need, because every time I say that it looks repetitive, but many people are working at practice level. They say we are doing agroecology because it's nice, you have compost, good practices, we're supporting farmers, but farmer has no right, so it's not agroecology. Okay, it's a start or not. Huh? But so this is really important to speak about these 10 elements or 13 principles, but also yes, it's quite a different. We don't use it so much, but the red flag or red line, I forgot because we changed the name because one was not so appropriate, are interesting because you can see the 10 bad habits you can have if you want to greenwash, and if you flag them, you say, okay, you're in the bad direction. So it can help also. But yeah, we prefer speaking about positive things, but it's good to have this. But yeah, I'm cautious with this because they are not endorsed at FAO level, but I like the idea.
Thank you. There are more questions around. So one is on the So first of all, they thank for the presentation, which I fully support. But then the question on transformation from a farmer's perspective. What are, in your sense, if you try to take a farmer's perspective, what are the biggest barriers? And are there enough kind of financial means for supporting this transition? And that's maybe going a bit more to you, Stephanie. They would like to have some examples in Switzerland, and maybe you can share some stuff of the work you do as BioVision in Switzerland.
Yeah, I'm not working in Switzerland with my team, so but what I can say is it really depends, of course, in which country you are. I think in Switzerland we have the direct payments, right? The Direktzahlungen, which already are quite supporting these transitions and agroecological practices to a certain degree. It's not enough, and it's also debated. But in countries like Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, you don't have anything supported by the government that helps you transition. So I think there are different farmers that really have big challenges. And I think it's a very good question, because the transition period is tough, because when you transition, you will have any kind of a decrease a bit in the yields. You need to change, you need to have a lot of knowledge, information. And that's also what we do. It's not just financing, but also who gives you then really the needed knowledge, you know? So, and in our work, we really work with extension servicers, because that's also a big lack in most of the countries, you know, that the farmers don't get the needed knowledge. And we heard agroecology is knowledge intensive. It's complex to transition. And especially the more crops, the more things you include in your farm, the more knowledge you need to have. So, but I think also financing is a big thing. That's also what we are doing now with the businesses. We have a lot of businesses that are farm-based companies, so farms. And that's their biggest hurdle, because they don't have a track record yet. They cannot go to a local bank because they say you are too risky. And unfortunately, agroecological businesses are often perceived as too risky for many investors, donors. So it's really tough also. When now we had this meta level, the theory of an agroecological business, and when you then talk to them and you see the reality, you see they have so many things they struggle with, and it's really tough to really become fully agroecological. So they need a lot of support, and yeah, they face a lot of barriers, especially in developing countries. So I think in Switzerland, we still have some things that are favoring supportive direct payments and so forth that other countries don't have yet.
Thank you. Maybe the next question is going to both of you. As you do work directly with governments and with policymakers, so how high is the pressure to have positive results if policymakers ask directly for kind of projects and interventions? And if there is a pressure to have positive results, how do you deal with that? Or how do you do you feel that there is always a need for success, or how do you work with policymakers in situations where probably the results are not as they were expected? That's how I understand this question.
I'm not sure I fully understand the question, but what I think is important in our work is that we realize that policymakers now realize how helpful agroecology is to tackle targets, many different targets at the same time. Because you have to imagine governments have so many goals they need to achieve, right? They have climate change targets, they are in the convention on the climate change, they need to achieve biodiversity targets, and then there is this convention on desertification and nutrition, and they have unemployment. And what we could show policymakers is that agroecology really is a great tool to because it contributes to all these goals. You know, it helps to make sure biodiversity loss can be prevented. It helps to tackle climate change at the same time. It creates employment. It produces food, safe and nutritious food. So that's also what we are working at the moment to show this 3 Rio Convention, as I just mentioned, that agroecology is really it helps to tackle many things at the same time. So it is already producing a lot of positive results, because yeah, if you have a policy on agroecology, it's not just one thing. It tackles things you need to do anyways. So yeah, I don't know if that answered the question partly. I mean, I don't know, Remy, if you want to say something on that, because you also work with governments.
Yes, I would say that of course they want positive results, and they are afraid of mistakes. So what I like to do is to first to work at a lower level sometime, at territorial level, and you can work at territorial level or show who are the champion at local level, and you can see at local level it can be more than a municipality, it can be a region, a sub-region. It's a French word. Region is smaller than a country in French, that's why. But you can work at a lower level and show that it's working. So because I think sometimes you have like some policymaker who are not afraid, who knows it works, and they can test. And at higher level, they can make the proof of concept, I would say, because I had already like a discussion with policymakers. I say, okay, it looks nice, but you know, I'm depending on my food security is of higher importance. I need to produce rice to multiple the rice production by 2 in the next year. I made this commitment to the population. It's a question of surviving. It's a question of being re-elected. So they can doubt. So yes, so they want to be sure. So that's why we want to come up with evidence also. Huh? So evidence to show that yes, the productivity in short term, mid term, and long term will be better. But we really need to re-ensure. Because yeah, it's a lot of pressure. You change, imagine you transform. That's the thing. That was the theme of today. We don't say we do a slight change. We say we transform. So you take a risk. And as Stephanie says also, this transition for farmers also is difficult, because we all see in the result of TAPE that the farmer who are at a transition level in the middle of the road, they have less results at economic level. So they can decide to come back. They can protest. So we need to have a policy package super strong. So yeah, you need to be prepared. So yes, I totally agree. We don't have pressure because they do it if they want, and they ask us when they are ready. But it's true that it's super important.
And maybe just one sentence. What we realized is that what they really, or to whom they listen to, are peers. And that's why we bring often governments together. So the same level, you know, policymakers, and we more as BioVision, we facilitate the process. So there was this 3-day meeting in Kenya, for example, where we brought these 8 governments together from the ministry, but also the civil society organizations there. So it was both government and civil society. And then let them exchange. And they then heard from other government officials what worked and what did not work. So that's quite convincing that they really, because they're in the same situation, in the same shoes, right? And we just try to make sure they can meet and can exchange. So that was quite powerful. And they were then quite convinced because they heard it from their peers and not just from an organization that could be ideologically, or I don't know. Yeah.
Thank you. And there is a last question on GMOs. The question is, why is there a reluctance of integrating GMOs into agroecology? And the argument is then made that on apples, you can all read that in the chat. I'm not going to read it out, but the question is it why is there no possibility to use potential benefits of GMOs also in agroecology when it comes to potential reduction of pesticides, for example? That could be a big opportunity.
Yeah, I can start, but it's not an easy task. But we were speaking about the 10 elements of 13 principles. That's why. So GMO, you can have a beneficial effect on pesticide, but what about the other? It's like it's a simple solution, but so farmer lose totally the autonomy, because who is doing the GMO? Will be farmer have autonomy to do it? And yes, GMO you can go fast, but it doesn't mean that with seeds you can go fast either, because we know as an epigenetic, we know that plants can adapt also. So you can also have solution. So no, the problem of GMO is really the problem of for me, the main problem is this, that it will be the end. We speak about not farmer, sorry, but about centralization of power. The power is in the hand of a few big enterprise. So the power is what? The power is food. If seeds are in the hand of a few enterprise, the food of everybody tomorrow will be in their hand. So you have no decentralization. So if you look at the principle, by the way, it's also in the red line. If you're also principle, you can check one by one objectively. Okay, this could be better, but this is a problem. This better is a problem. I think it's just analytical.
Anything to add from your side, Stephanie?
No. I think it's really, as you said, the social political aspect, not what's happening on the farm, but really who has the power. So really nicely put, Remy. No.
Good. With that, I think we are concluding this third session, and I really want to thank you again, Stephanie and Remy, for being with us. I want to thank everyone who joined this session, or even all the three. So thank you all for these engaged discussions. We will put the presentations and the recordings online at a later time. We will be very busy in the team next week, so probably I can't promise next week, but as soon as it's online, we will also communicate via social media that this series is also online for a revisit of these very interesting perspectives you all shared with us. Thank you for your presence.
Thank you.
Have a lovely rest of the afternoon.
Thank you. Goodbye.
And see you soon. Ciao.
Thank you.
Ciao.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Have a good day.